Great. Hi, everyone. So today we're going to be doing NDIS Regulatory Reform Pathway 2026, what it means for providers. So we've got a PowerPoint we're going to go through, and then we've got time at the end for some questions. So please, if you've got any questions as well, feel free to pop them in the chat or unmute yourself and ask them throughout the presentation. Um, but yeah, we're very excited to do this. So let me just share my screen. Let me know if you're able to see that.
I can.
Perfect. Okay, great. So, what does the new reforms mean for providers? So, a bit of background. Um, what reform is even happening? So, the NDIS Commission has been reviewing the system for a while now. There was a Royal Commission in 2023 as well as an NDIS review in 2023. So they both published over 100 recommendations for some changes. And then these new changes are in response to those findings. So we're in 2026 now, so it's been a while of planning, and we're finally starting to see the effects of that in place. So then what are the new changes that we're talking about? So in February of 2026, the NDIS published some more information. They published a regulatory reform pathway, which we'll be looking at, and that is related to mandatory registration. So for supported independent living, as well as platform providers, mandatory registration is due to begin from July 1st, 2026. The new practice standards for SIL providers will begin as well from 2026, July. There's going to be a NDIS practice standards review, and there's going to be some changes to the NDIS Act and rules as well, or there's going to be a review of those. So, our regulatory reform pathway. So I've got a link to it here, and we'll send out the link for the download of that as well. But this is just a simple map of the changes, and it's on our next slide here. So a lot of information here. This mandatory registration pathway and the SIL. So we'll start at the top up here. So you can see that for mandatory registration, it is for SIL and platform providers. We will talk a bit more in depth about it further in the presentation, but you'll notice that support coordination is no
It's
longer on
been
this.
removed.
It's been
Yes.
removed. So we will talk a bit about what the future of support coordination is looking like, but at the moment the NDIS has paused that and mandatory registration is focused on SIL and platform providers. So we are in March 2026 at the moment, almost April. So at the moment they are still in policy development of this mandatory registration. So they're looking at what the legislative changes will be. So it's still in this very early phase of this timeline, so things are always due to move around. Then in April and May, um, it's going to be consultation, including key stakeholders and state and territory ministers. So this is where they're really going to be deciding on those changes and deciding how it's going to look. And then in June, they expect to do some rule making. And then by July 1st, 2026, with an asterisk on it, so it's always due to move, maybe. The transitional arrangements will be in effect. And you notice that this timeline here goes from July 2026 all the way up until June 2027. So that means that the transitional arrangements they're not planning by August 1st that everyone's going to be registered. They're
No.
aware that this is a process. So it is a transitional arrangement. We don't know what that looks like at the moment, of course. They haven't said. We're still in the
Mm.
policy development, but we know that it's coming.
The
So,
talk was also that through the safeguarding bill that they accept that they're not going to meet that target until 2030. So it's
yes.
going to take that long to get everyone
It-
registered. Mm.
yes, exactly. So this mandatory registration at the moment is just for SIL platform providers, but based on the recommendations from those Royal Commissions and the NDIS review, and based on everything we've seen, they are aiming for mandatory registration for all providers. It will be a risk-based approach, and obviously SIL is the higher risk, so that is why they are pushing that first. And then it will keep going until eventually all providers will need to be registered. So this is just the first wave of changes. So if you're holding off thinking, well, I'm not doing still, so I'll keep being unregistered, just be aware that it's very likely that by 2030 is, I think, their aim, that you will require registration. So
Yeah, there's not going to be a provider in the market that isn't
yeah,
mandated to be registered.
exactly. And the existing registered providers, transitional agreements, TBC early 2026, we are approaching the end of early 2026, so we'll see whether or not they publish those transitional arrangements soon. But they are going to get the new people into the system, and then what it means for the rest of the cohort is yet to be seen. And then you can see that throughout this whole period, they are expecting stakeholder engagement. So um, whether or not that is specific consultation, it does mean though that they do want feedback. So if you do see if you've got opinions, please always raise them with the commission, send in your feedback. Whether or not they take it into consideration is their discretion, but always make sure if you've got something to say with the commission that you send it in. Um, and then for the practice standards, so these are new SIL related services practice standards. So we're still in the consultation phase and policy development phase. So haven't been established yet. And then we're going to come up to rulemaking as well. And then from July 1st, 2026, the new registration of SIL providers will include these new SIL practice standards. We don't know what those standards are at the moment. So they haven't published them. There's no draft. There's nothing that we can see. However, it would be filling the gaps of the already expected outcomes of the practice standards that just weren't written down initially. There's not going to, we can't expect that there's going to be any major surprises. There's not going to be requiring you to do something that wouldn't be already a sort of expectation of a SIL provider at the moment. So if you're registered now,
Except for the fact that there's
yeah,
one big gap
yeah,
from the moment I became an NDIS auditor was there was nothing related to SIL
yes,
specifically.
exactly,
It's all very, very airy fairy.
yes,
Sure, you might give them some medication and sure, you might do X, Y, Z, but there was nothing that said well, you have a module 4 for a support coordinator, but you don't have a module for SIL. So
yes. So now they're going to be patching that up with these new practice standards. But it would be expected that they
it
won't
might just
be,
look like a packaging, hey, Ali, like,
yeah,
you know how it's all about packaging
yeah,
and so I think if you looked at every single part of the standards as they are now, you might be able to piece together a puzzle that looks like, that looks like a SIL provider. Maybe it's just a matter of them packaging it so that people don't have to look so abstractly and go, well, I just don't see anything in here that says SIL.
yes,
Like maybe they'll just like package it and then strengthen it a little bit more so that
yes,
it's really clear, like a module 4 or a module 2 or a module 3. Like it's just so
exactly.
ridiculous the
Exactly.
way it's
That's what we
been.
we expect to see. Um, so for existing registered providers, the timing of the compliance against these new standards will form part of the transitional arrangements. That means that they're not expecting everybody to, by July 1st, be ready to go with these new standards. It is a transitional period. It's the beginning of it. Um, and so you can expect to see some confusion at the start, especially depending on um, how the practice standards are distributed to the audit bodies, depending on whether or not the guidance material of
Yeah.
what to be audited will be given. So that is all part of this standard. So you can expect to see a little bit of
Confusion.
confusion and back and forth at the start, but that's all that is taken into account by that transitional arrangement. So um, from the changes we saw, uh, I saw a question in the chat. You just look
It's
it
sort of
up.
going to be like every time, when we had changes back in 2021, and it was like nobody really quite understood whether they were, oh, do they really mean it when they say X, Y, Z? And the auditors would go, well, I mean it. And then the commission go, no, we didn't really mean it. And the providers would think, well, we don't really know because none of you know. So it's going to be a bit like that.
Yes.
A bit of argy-bargy in the interpretation, which happens, in my experience, it happens for at least a year to 18 months after every big change.
Exactly. So we've got a
Yeah.
question in the chat, Gina, which is
Yeah.
from Cassandra. Maybe ask later, but any idea on how this impacts people who have SIL funding but use it more for ILO for an ILO way? For example, two participants who are funded for three-person SIL but live in their own place with supports that suit their needs.
No idea. I can't see. SIL was never intended to be rigid, even from the very beginning. So there's no reason why there can't be room for person-centeredness. I have seen nothing that would rule that out. That would take away the absolute person-centered nature of the whole program if they did. So I don't think that they would do anything to ruin it. They'll just have to problem solve it.
Okay, great. Thank you for
Yeah.
that. Um, so then on our PowerPoint, so next on the slide is the roadmap. So this is what we've talked about, but in a little bit more detail. So this is what their reform priorities were over the next 12 months. So this is again published in February of 2026. So it goes over the goals of this reform. So making changes to improve the quality and safety of the supports being delivered for NDIS participants. And that the reforms are a response to the emerging and long-standing quality and safety and integrity issues. So will ensure that participants receive progressively higher standards of NDIS supports and services. So these are designed to sort of fill the gaps that have been long overdue to be filled. And so that map that we looked at before focused on mandatory registration and still practice standards, but there's also the practice standards review and the NDIS Act rules, which we'll talk about as well. So they're going to support transition to the new regulatory setting by providing clear notice and transition periods for the new reforms. So from the 2021 changes, one of the pushback they got was from the lack of a clear notice and timeframes. It went from a month between being published and being implemented. So we can expect that they have learned from that, and that there will be more notice given. And they'll certainly be facing more pushback if they don't give the notice. So we can expect to see a reasonable amount of time given to providers to prepare. That being said, they do expect, based on the Commission's website, they do expect that unregistered providers are putting into place their arrangements now as well. So you're making the steps to get audit ready before this registration begins as well. So they expect some work to be done in this beginning of 2026. But of course, you can't prepare for the unknown standards that are coming. And then they're going to
Correct.
yeah. And then providing accessible written guidance, information on the website. So, so while the NDIS does need to communicate this information with people, it is also the provider's responsibility to be up to date with the new reforms. So consistently checking the NDIS website. I'll just pop up here now. On the NDIS Commission website, under About Us, there's a NDIS regulatory reforms page. So it lists all of the reforms, the latest information. It's got the roadmap that we're talking about, and at the bottom of the page, they'll say when they were last updated. So that's how you can tell whether or not the information's new or not. So making sure you're consistently checking this, and staying up to date with all of that. Conducting informational webinars on specific changes. So the NDIS will be giving more information about the changes once they publish them. And then also engaging with the state and territory governments and regulators who have obligations relating to with people with disabilities. So working with the states to make these changes. So then we've spoken about this already.
So we
So
haven't covered the support coordination because it was removed.
yeah.
Is there anyone in the room that's interested in the support coordination? trajectory? Not particularly. That's okay. I'm happy to leave it.
We've got a slide on it. Oh, yes, please. Samira would like you to talk. We do have a slide on it a bit later as well.
All right.
So
Well, we'll wait till we get to that then. Sorry, I
okay. No, no, no,
jumped the
that's all
line.
right. And a broad overview will be good. Yes, we do have a broad, yes, please. We will get to that. I'll hand it over to you when that's time, Gina.
Okay.
Perfect.
Mm.
So with mandatory registration, as we know, they've done some previous work on it, and where they are now is that designing that new registration, and here are our next steps. And then still practice standards. So these are going on from January 2023, so it's taking a while. They are testing them with a small group of people, um, and they say that they were up to doing an audit. The findings of that have not been published, so we don't know yet. Um, but then coming to the practice standards review. So part of the so there's two sorts of practice standards right now that are being reviewed. There's the new SIL standards, which are being written and then implemented.
Piloted.
Yes,
Yeah.
piloted. And then we've got a practice standards review of the existing practice standards are going to be updated based on consultation and work with the community. So they have
Well,
done some.
we went to that. Like I went to that, and we went to separate ones, Ali and I, and that was in true fashion. That wasn't a consultation. He was telling us what they were going to do. He wasn't particularly interested. In fact, more offended by hearing anything to the contrary of what he had on his PowerPoint slide.
Mm. So um, work is being done on it as far as we know, but they have not published a date or timeline for that. So um, again, it comes down to if you're holding out for registration, thinking, "I'll wait till I change the practice standards." Things take a long time in the NDIS. They take a long, long time. So don't hold out for that because you know that registration is coming. So you're better off being
I
in the
would rather
system.
be in the transition phase because you're given all of these, like
Yes,
credits, if you like. You're given of, oh, well, you're still in the transition phase. That won't happen as soon as you go into the new phase.
yes. If you're coming
So
into a new system, they expect that you're just able to go. There's no reason that you would have been in the old, like you don't need to be transitioning per se. But if you are operating under the old system and then transitioning,
you will be given, yeah,
you'll be given
leeway.
some grace and leeway,
Yeah,
and more clear communication as well about those changes. So definitely,
yeah.
getting in the system rather than waiting for those changes. And then
Mm.
the acts and rules. So there was a publication of the what we've heard, and then there have been some proposed legislative changes. And so the NDIS Amendment Integrity and Safeguarding Bill was introduced in the end of 2025. And there's still, I believe,
It's being
uh,
debated on the floor of Parliament in
yep,
May, I think, because I wrote a paper.
yep.
So that will be debated. And in the lower house, I think. And I've written a really juicy what did I write? A commentary paper on where it all went wrong, basically. Um, it was more
Yes,
punishment, lots of punishment, which is reactive and no proactive.
yes.
So bit of a bummer. Hope they listen.
Yes, absolutely. Um, so just key takeaways from these two documents, and then we'll get onto that bill and support coordination. So key takeaway from the reform documents, the changes are happening from July 2026. They don't need to happen by July. So do not
Yeah.
expect to have everything ready by then. They are
Yeah.
happening from mandatory
Just
registration.
get ready to jump on your journey and
Yes,
from the
get
1st of
ready.
July.
Yes, get ready for that. Mandatory
Yeah.
registration is going to be coming for all based on what we've seen. It'd be very surprising if they decided not to. The new SIL standards shouldn't be a big deal if you're already compliant in the sense that they will be filling in the gaps that weren't explicitly written. There may be a couple of things that will be more explicit, but you know, there's expectation that I think originally that people would just know what to do, and now they're making sure that there's actually written into the standards.
Yeah.
Um, and then what about support coordination? So, mandatory registration reform for that was paused, but multiple independent reviews and inquiries have recommended strengthening the regulation of support coordinators. So, history tells us this means a major change is coming. I'll pass over to you now, Gina.
Okay, so I've got nothing in writing, but having been in government and policy and strategy and this sector for a long time, I have a sense of what decommissioning looks like. And there were two telltale signs with support coordination, but when they paused the mandatory registration, I think that was kind of for me, and I couldn't bet my property or my life savings on it, but for me, that was sort of closing the loop on what a decommissioning looks like. And it wouldn't surprise me if they were. There's every reason to support why support coordination should be taken out of this framework where it is because of all of the bad apples that have brought the scheme undone. But that's neither here nor there because what matters is what will they do. So I think that they'll probably I think that they'll take it out of the hands of people who have no experience, and there'll probably be a couple of options. One will be that they commission it out properly with applications and more like a tender or something like that. Or they may put it in a third party's hands, like if you've seen the buy-ups that have occurred with the plan management um, agencies, like health funds have bought up the plan management agencies, so they may welcome, or there could be deals going on in the background, which I think there are for any of those kind of intermediary roles, which are plan management and support coordination, to perhaps be fully removed from this market. So these are just my theories, and I'm just judging by the actions that I've witnessed. Um, you know, so
Yes,
yeah,
exactly, because we saw that very shock announcement, or well, limited warning announcement originally in 2024, that they were
mm,
going to be introducing mandatory registration.
mm,
And that it did originally include that support coordination, but then
yeah,
following the consultation, they're both saying that stronger regulation is needed, and then also pausing that reform, which just tells us that, as
it's just
Gina
the
said,
third sign.
yeah,
Yeah.
that there's probably something going on, whether or not they take it out of the market or whether or not they make major reforms to it before
Or whether
implementing.
they took it statutory within to their own thing. I don't think that's the answer because I think that the government, especially the NDIA, managed things very poorly, probably more um, more poorly, if you like, than I've seen any other government agency in my lifespan manage something. So I wouldn't like to see it there anyway. But um, yeah, and it's only my theory. So yeah.
And then next slide is about our NDIS Amendment Integrity and Safeguarding Bill. So it proposes 10 amendments to the NDIS Act, strengthening the regulatory capabilities of the Commission and addressing several administrative changes of the NDIA. And the key proposed reforms included stronger penalty framework and with increased civil penalties and new criminal offences, a new anti-promotion order to restrict market that exploits participant and undermines the
I love
scheme.
that. It's rampant with that. It's got to stop.
Good.
Yeah.
The expansion of banning order categories, including auditors and consultants, a
Yeah.
stronger information gathering powers, and the use of evidentiary certificates in court. So, Judy, you're more familiar
Okay.
with this one, so pass to
Yeah.
you.
So essentially, uh, it's not enough, and I wrote that as such about the things that they had missed and etc., which may or may not interest you. But But I did also say that stronger penalty frameworks, civil penalties, I agree, absolutely. They need to hold the individual to account, no longer just the business, because there's, I don't know if you know how many Phoenix entities there are from the people who are banned, opening up again, over and over and over again. So that needs to stop. So I do agree with individual penalties against the person, holding them responsible. In terms of the person managing the organisation, just like they do in aged care. So it's not like that's not a brand new thing. That's how it works in healthcare. You know, like you will get in trouble if you don't take responsibility for the strategic and compliance and quality within your organisation. They shouldn't be able to walk away and start again if they've already hurt some people. So what else? Yeah, I'm in agreement with all the other things, but I think that they've kind of missed a whole lot of other smaller things that could be done to improve the integrity and safeguarding. And I do hope, I've got great hope that they might listen around the governance. Like that, there's no mention in this safeguarding bill of governance. And if any of you have ever listened to any of my training or webinars, you'll know that at the very top of everything is governance and the way that you manage things. And they haven't even talked about that. And so, you know, I did propose a whole range of things in my paper. And I really do hope that they look at those things, because without them, we will just have more of the same. And I see no point in punishing people harder. I mean, the commissioner sat there and said, we view this, this is a deterrent. It's like, you're still killing people. Like, we can't just have a stick. We also have to have other things which would prevent people from getting into that position in the first place, because the trouble is they're not understanding that people aren't going out there and killing people on purpose. They don't know what they're doing in some cases. So the governance is what would strengthen that. So I'm totally against stronger penalty frameworks. I am for expanding them to include personal liability, so that a director can't go and open 5 other organisations after harm that's been caused to somebody. But I do think we need to really stack up front all of the preventative measures to assist people to never get there in the first place. So we'll just see. I hope, I can't wait to watch it being that, I hope I get to see it debated from the floor. But yeah, I really do hope that they listen, because they haven't got it right so far. So, we'll see.
Yes.
Yeah.
And then that's the end of like our pre-prepared presentation. So now we're open to questions. So if you've got any specific questions, please pop them in the chat or unmute yourself, and we can speak about that now.
And we will put this up as send it out to you as a recording as well, because I mean, obviously we've probably 40 people aren't here.
Yes.
So yeah, we'll be sending this out.
So Cassandra said, I also think they need to recognize and listen to the people who are trying to help and report if they see something wrong, or recognize the advocates and allies.
I don't think they listen enough.
Yes.
They don't. I don't think they listen enough. They could have, I know that they talked about how they could harness, and thank you for reminding me, Cassandra. They talked about in the bill in depth about, what the new role, what there could be differences in the way, what auditors might look like. And they didn't differentiate whether that meant, make them behave themselves better, or whether they meant could we use them in some other role. So I don't know, but I touched on that as well. And I touched on the fact that many of the auditors are the problem, and the audit companies, which I touched on and said the fact that they're for profit, you have introduced straight off the top, you've introduced a conflict of interest. So it is in their best interest that they don't find too many non-conformities if they are worried about whether they're going to get that person back. Because what we know from the last however many years, since 2019, we know that people will shop around often for an auditor where they won't have to be challenged too much. And Ali and I know full well who some of those auditors are. and have detached ourselves from them. And we know that some clients will still ask for that auditor, and we just say we don't know where they are. So you can see that there are so many problems, but at the same time, there are some incredibly good auditors, and they could have been working with the commission. So the commission thinks that it knows everything. The commission doesn't think that it should listen to anybody else. They truly just don't take help and suggestion very well. So you just totally agree. There are other people that they could be listening to, but they don't listen. And I've never seen it more clearly than when I went to that standards consultation. My foot. It wasn't a consultation. He was just telling us how it was going to be. But I told him what I thought and then said goodbye. So there you go. But
Yes, and Cassandra's got a follow-up. So do you think that the NDIA will recognize their own failings, i.e. the staff or processes that create the extra costs?
I'm hoping so, because we're certainly working on that. We're certainly working on a lot of questions. The person that I work for has already been approached by the minister, and the minister thanked her for all her questions and is working closely with her now. So that's a really good start. That means to be honest, the minister said to her, sometimes I don't even know what to do with this department. I just can't, I do my best. I push and I push, and she does. McAllister is a pusher, she just knows that they're always lying to her.
Mm.
So,
Sorry. We've got a question from Julie. How the SIL reforms apply to registered providers already providing SIL supports? Just need to implement new standards and be audited against them in the next audit cycle. I wish I could give you a definite answer, Julie. That is most likely the way they would do it. I can't imagine that they're going to require an out-of-cycle audit. Most likely it will be that they're implementing new standards, and then
it will
yes,
be when
just
they fold you.
yes,
They won't
it will just
have a
be
new one.
within
No.
18 months because that's how
Yeah.
long an audit cycle is. So
Yeah.
most likely how they would do it, but I can't give you a
Mm.
definite answer, unfortunately.
Mm.
Yeah, I couldn't find it in the past.
Yeah.
But
That's because they don't know.
no,
Yes.
Yeah.
They
That will be
that would
because
probably
they're not even what's that word? What's the word when they agree they're going to use them? They're still in
they're not even
piloting mode.
definitive.
Yeah,
Yeah.
they're still in pilot. But
Yeah.
what they do is, I mean, like they did in 2021 with, when we had 3 new standards, that was big, and about 14 other changes amongst others. Is they just implemented them, and people got non-conformities, but I think they're not so silly, dim-witted that, if somebody didn't know the standards were changing, of course, if you don't know the standards are changing and you get non-conformities, they'll probably be more lenient on that because nobody knew about them. And that will be the transition period.
Do you have
And that's
any?
what the transition period will be for. It's usually, what did they say it would be? They didn't say how long, did they, Ali?
No, they haven't. They haven't
But they
said.
will do that. Yeah. Unless it's something that's really serious that would have got picked up regardless of whether there were new SIL standards or not. I mean, there are things that providers are not doing, which is just ridiculous. Like if they're a dangerous thing and it just happens to be that that's the new standard as well, well, you would have got in trouble for that without the standard. You see what I mean? Like, what would a reasonable person be expecting? Would I have gotten into strife for not doing this, even if these standards weren't here? So just because the standard says it and you got in trouble for it, but you would have got in trouble for it anyway.
What do you think would be some of the areas the standards might strengthen?
Cover. Oh, well, I mean, for SIL, it's going to be, there is nothing about matching. There is nothing about, not enough about behaviour support from a practical perspective. I don't mean when it qualifies for a restrictive practice. I mean, there is zero mention of positive behaviour support in anything other than a Module 2A.
You mean
And not everybody's having a restrictive practice. So there's so much strengthening needed on that. I would love to see there be more mentioning of governance within that, but I would have wanted that anywhere. And then they don't talk enough about how these all work together. They don't say anything about why you would have audits of, internal audits once a month, your vehicles, your medication charts, your air, all of these things that we know we did under the old system. It would be unheard of to not do them. Um, there should be more standardized requirements on how often I'm asked, well, how many times should I do supervision with how many times should I have a staff meeting? It should say that. We need to give people, if we're going to have a marketplace where the people don't know what they're doing, then we should be giving them the equal, we should be giving them proportionate guidance in a manual. Do you know what I mean? A manual and standards backing that up. So I would like to see, a whole lot more guidance around day-to-day hiring, training, managing, and the essence of the whole thing is the way people speak to each other. So positive behaviour support. Yeah, I think they're the nuts and bolts of it.
Yeah. Thank you.
It's okay.
So we've got a question from Cassandra. Also, what about the fact that you can remove clients from getting audited and it's up to the auditor to let them know who their clients are? I've been told I can remove clients from the list and don't have to give a reason or anything.
Yeah, well, it didn't start out that way, so that's gone the wrong way. So what we used to say, and we have always said, even before the NDIS was here, because I was in mental health before that, is this is what happens. This is exploited. We have always said, yes, we want to interview clients, but if interviewing them is going to destabilize them, then we don't want to see them. So you know what everyone's done? They just go, oh, we just have to say that. We just have to say oh no, you can't see them. They'll be destabilized. So they've just learned that this sector has learned how to exploit. And but no one has ever said you can take them off the list. They must be on the list. And if you ever see that, just report it straight to Jazan's, the commission, everywhere you possibly can, because and if any auditor ever says that, report that. Like that's just wrong. That's just exploitation. The list is the list, and we can often go down that list and choose, which clients we would like to see, and what should happen is that the organisation might say, this one, I'm a little bit concerned about them. They're not very, they've been known to kind of destabilise if somebody asks all those questions. But that should be the exception rather than the rule. And it seems to me it's become the rule. First time I've thought about that really, but over the last 5 and 6 years, I think it's become the rule. No, we're not going to show them that one. It's just awful.
Yeah.
The other thing you said, because it just reminded me of what I missed from the safeguarding bill. What did you start that question off with?
How to remove clients from getting audited, and it's up to the auditor to let them know who their clients are.
Yeah, no, I thought it came to me. There was another part in the bill that I'd missed out on, but if it comes back to me, I'll bring it up. Yeah, naughty, naughty, naughty.
Yes.
There's just so much naughty. I mean, you've got naughty coming from every direction. Like we didn't have naughty before all this, because of all of the conflicts of interest, the money that's in it, the money from the audit for the audit company, the money for the auditor, the fact that the auditors were drumming up business for their own consulting before they banned them being consultants, but still some of them are consulting as well as auditing. It was just one big lucrative money pot for everybody. Where
And
you
we've
get
also
that, you
seen,
get problems.
yes, exactly. And we've also seen some providers, whether intentionally or not, mis-explaining the audit process to the client, more so to get them to opt out, or it might be they're going to be
Yes,
talking to you and, giving them a
you're
little
right.
bit. So sometimes people can
Yep,
give them the wrong information, which makes them go, I don't want anybody looking at my file. I don't want,
correct.
whereas they
You bet.
miss rather than explaining to them the importance of someone being able to
Horrible.
check that they're doing the right thing, they see
Mm.
it as, oh no, they're just checking through your stuff because they're nosy. So then that
Yep,
also leads to,
exploitation.
yes.
Yep. And that comes down to the actual, market that we have. Do you know, I can tell you, hand on my heart, that in the 2000s, when I started assessing standards, no one ever did that. Not one. I've never done it as an organization. And we never even had to address that issue as auditors back then. It didn't happen.
Um, yes, and then so we've got a question from Albert. If the reforms are going to help eradicate the fraudulent behavior, that is a good thing. NDIS has a negative view by the public. My question is, are the changes going to provide providers faced with the lack of support workers and the alignment of support workers to participants? Is there discussion on the lack of support workers?
I don't think there is a lack of support workers. I think there's a lack of expertise in the sector to be able to recognize when there isn't a good support worker. Sometimes the person that's running the business or managing the business is in themselves completely lacking in any, sometimes in intelligence, but oftentimes, more often than not, in any experience in knowing how to run. So you've actually got such a layer on layer set of problems. To my mind, that market is 60% malaligned to the task it has to do. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
It's not what you
Um,
want to hear, but it's, to me, it's the truth.
mm,
And here we are, whether we like it or not.
yes, Albert agrees.
Yeah,
Uh, And Paige, I agree, support worker has changed. Yes, there's been a real lack of the professional development and making sure people have the skills required to work, especially if you're sending people into high complex cases without proper training or
which
proper mental
happens
health
every
support.
day of the week. Yeah. And
Yes.
did you know that, like, like whoever listens to this in the future too, does everyone know that support work was not the second most dangerous position in Australia until the NDIS? Like, that wasn't the second most dangerous position, second only to building and labouring. So,
Yeah. Um, yes, Albert, heaps of complaints from participants. Exactly.
yeah, it's a real shame. But
Yes, it is. Um, any other questions? I've gone through all the ones in there, so please, if you've got more questions, pop them in the chat or unmute yourself and say it out loud. That's also welcome.
so the regulatory pathway is not all that scary. It's changing. It needed to. There's always plenty of time. You've got transition periods. If you're unregistered, I would, from a perspective of the fact that the conflict of interest and the money gouging from the audit company sector is rife, I would rather, if it were me, get in earlier rather than be one of the ones caught trying to get in at the last minute, because you are going to have your eyes gouged out financially.
Um, uh, I'll read your question in a second, Cassandra. Just on that point as well. Um, So, whether or not you're familiar with how auditing and audit companies work, um, the NDIS Commission hasn't allowed new audit companies to be introduced into the market since 2023. So there has been a strict cap on the number of, well, auditors that are available. So I assume this year that they'll probably allow new auditors to enter the market again, because we're going to come to a bottleneck very soon, once they roll out this registration, because people need an audit. And There's only so
Mm.
many auditors in the market as well. So the longer you leave it, the further into that bottleneck you'll also get, because there's only so many auditors in the world. And if you join with the rest of the people, you may be waiting 3, 6 months for an audit,
But
which,
the audit companies, they raise their prices so high.
yes, there is no standardized pricing for audits. So it is up to the discretion of them. And if there's high demand, it may be a good time for them to raise the prices. So keep that in mind when you're looking around. Um, so then, Cassandra, the support worker workforce is a third of the size of what we thought it would need to be during the rollout. I remember having these conversations. I also think that we have done a bad job talking about the benefits of being a support worker.
Yeah, I mean, I think a lot of people see the benefits of being a support worker, sadly, as I can go out on my own and earn $65 an hour, base rate. And that's some of the problems we were talking about politically the other day. Why would you not do that when you can? But here's the thing that the NDIA, well, it wasn't the NDIA that did this, it was all the states and territories that built it and the Department of Social Services. What they didn't think about is that money wasn't really intended just for one person. That $65 is including on costs. So the reality of it is, and I just had someone come to me the other day who she has all sole traders that work for her son, and she pays them out of the plan. What's going to happen is if they register, they're going to be up for a whole lot of money, like all the money it costs to get registered and maintain your registration. But they become very acquainted, very, very, what's the word? Very, very accustomed to getting $65 or the entire whatever it is with the loading on it when they do that shift. That's a false economy. So now we have a lot of people who think that they're worth $65 an hour, a day rate, but they're actually not, because that was the on costs included. It was meant for the bigger organizations, not big, but bigger. So now we've created a distorted workforce. And we're going to have problems with that.
Yeah.
If you think we don't have enough support workers yet, what do you think they're going to do when, I don't know, when they decide they're not going to register, but no one's going to pay them $65 an hour because that's all they're getting paid? Like we've got so many problems that have been what you call the unintended consequences of a legislation.
Yes.
So, and I think we could have done a lot better promoting support work, but let's not promote it as sole traders, because what happens if we lose all that? What happens if it goes back, the old system, in 10 years or 5 years, and everyone finds themselves employed by either a statutory body again or a not-for-profit?
Yeah.
I think it's worth thinking about.
Yes.
I really do.
And on that topic, Paige just said there are significant benefits to being a support worker. However, there appears to be increasing difficulty in sourcing those quality workers who are genuinely focused on supporting participants to build independence and develop capacity. It's one of the only roles where your goal is to actually work yourself out of the position. Lol.
Well, that's so true. And you know what? It's the same everywhere you go. But what do you think happens to the good ones? Tell me.
They burn out.
Burnout is one thing that can happen, but what else happens to the good ones? They become the
Lose
team
passion.
leaders and then the managers.
Yes.
And in the NDIS, they go out on their own, you see?
Mm.
But they're not there anymore.
Yeah.
So it's good, but it's not good.
Yep.
Mm.
So then question from Albert, would training in this area, because Cert 3 in disability doesn't cover what happens on the ground floor, alignment to participants is crucial with appropriate skills and experience. This is a concern. Do you think the reforms would address this in some way?
No, the No, not at this point. I haven't seen anything addressing that. I think that's like one kind of, tree that's
Systemic
too far
issue.
away for them.
Yeah, that's another issue.
I
But
think they're leaving the market to do that. And then that's okay, because when I started in as consulting, there was only like 5 of us.
Mm.
And now we've got everyone who thinks they're a consultant. And like there are lots of good ones and there are lots of not good ones. So we're once again faced with the same thing.
And then from Sharon, I'm coming up for recertification as a support coordinator. I'm appalled at the cost of audits. I've
Yeah.
got 4 quotes ranging from 5 to 7,000. How do they base what this cost covers? There is no basis for audit costs. They pick their price based on.
They can pick their price exactly because they do it by a daily rate. To work out the methodology to give you a quote, now that is a methodology that's fixed in the Act, but the daily rate, not. So what you can do is you can question the methodology, right? You can, you can ask to check what the methodology, say, I just want to check, the methodology that you're using because it's X amount for this, to say how many days your audit will be, right? So if they can justify that they've done that correctly and it's still high, then they're either using, and knowing their daily rate will help you too. Maybe you could start with asking the daily rate of the audit company.
Pricing has to be transparent as per their registration to be an auditor. So they do have to make that information available to you if you ask
Which
for
they
it.
never do. So they never do.
Yes.
So if you ask each one of those audit companies for their daily rate, you got to hopefully trust that they're using the right methodology to charge you to what the multiplication will be of the daily rate, but the daily rate can fluctuate. So ask for that.
Yep. And Sharon said, thanks. All the others have only been 4 hours or so. So thanks for your audit.
Oh,
It
that's
should
a
be.
lot. Gosh.
Um, just while we're on the topic of audits as well, if you guys aren't aware as well, with when you've got complaints about auditors, obviously you can make them to the audit company, but JASANZ, JASANZ, is the accreditation body that oversees all the audit companies, so you can always report them to them as well. If you've got an issue, the auditor is not God. They're not the highest level in this market. I think a lot of people don't realize that they are also being audited themselves by someone else. So
Well,
making
I
sure you,
think that they also, what's that word? They intimidate people.
yes, sometimes they can, because if you're not familiar with the scheme, you're not familiar with all of
With the
the
rules, the bare
accreditation,
rules. Yeah.
then it can be very confusing. But there
Yeah.
are people that you can, if you've got concerns about them, you can obviously raise
Go to.
those. So then, Taryn, we are a provider who opened up our first SIL house 1 year ago. We're a registered provider, and in your opinion, what are the biggest problems providers face when it comes to compliance in SIL houses?
First of all, not even knowing what they're doing. Now, that's not a joke. I'm not saying that to be funny or sarcastic. First of all, they have no idea what they're doing, and they are just danger living and breathing in the same house with a client. So, the first thing I'd have to say is that they're not familiar with what they're supposed to do. And the second thing I'd say is they have a hard time deciding that they should be paying to get advice to know what they're doing. They don't ever read their policies and procedures. They have no understanding of them whatsoever. They don't understand what a support worker should be doing. They don't understand the impacts of positive behavior and behavioral knowledge in behavioral management, even when you don't have a person with a restrictive practice. And they don't
Client matching?
they don't know how to client match. In fact, even if they did, there are some naughty providers who don't care. They just think they need the money, so they will place somebody where they shouldn't be. The other part to the SIL providers is they don't assess properly and they don't risk assess properly. and they don't provide supervision to their staff. But then if you don't know what you're doing, then I suppose it's probably a good idea that they're not giving them supervision. But yeah, they're the main things. These are just the main things.
Yes, we've seen some providers who they are in mainland Australia and their still houses in Tasmania that the provider has visited maybe twice in the year that it's
Yeah.
running. So you need to be there as well. Surprise drop-ins are always better than a planned one
Yeah.
because you're much more likely to find out what people are really doing if they don't know you're coming.
When you drop in. The other thing, can I just say, always a touchy subject, but I doesn't worry me, but is English. Um, you know, it's or even a language. Maybe the other way around. It might be the staff members English and the clients, because it doesn't happen that way. See, most of the time when the client speaks a different language, they're usually well taken care of with people with their own language. But what we see a lot, and I've seen something just at the tribunal not long ago, when the young man was given the space in the tribunal hearing to say, the behaviour support practitioner said, isn't there one more thing that is wrong with where you are being cared for? And he shook his head no. And then the lawyer said, didn't we talk about something the other day? And he said, that's how scared he was. He said, I have to be able to understand them. So, you know, people have to be able to be understood. We have a lot of that here. I think it works both ways.
Absolutely. So yes, language barriers.
Yeah.
Even with people who English is a first language, you everyone's got different comprehension skills.
Yeah.
And so if you don't understand the technical jargon, especially if you're getting people who are getting behavior support plans, that's often where we see it. Is you're getting a behavior support plan, it's written for a university graduate, but nobody in the field
Yeah.
is a university graduate or nobody cares to read a 100-page document. So that's
Oh
also
yes, and and what did they say now? They need to make sure with your behaviour support practitioners, you need to make sure that they've
there are
also
about
given
eight,
you
a
one in a year 8 language. Yeah.
year eight language is sort of the recommendation that is the English proficiency that you'd expect to see for all support workers. So year eight
Yeah.
English is that level. So therefore the plan should be written at that level as well
Yeah.
so people can understand them. You can't expect people to understand behavior support in a language that they don't know. But
Yeah.
you also can't expect someone that has spoken English their whole life to understand it if they've never looked at behavior before. They've just come into this role
Yeah.
because
Yeah.
of that. And then questions. So Cassandra, I'm due for my three full audit and I'm scared about the cost of my audit, but I remember when I first
Oh.
registered and there were no audits, just had to send financial budgets to the ACT government. Mm.
Well, those days are gone. It's just a money
Um,
making machine. But yeah, do ask around what's your daily rate. But remember, it'll be different if it's a nurse involved.
yep.
And if you don't want a nurse or need a nurse because you don't have a module 1, then if you're being given a nurse, say something because they charge more for a nurse.
And then just going through the chat. Cassandra, I send out surveys to the providers I work with to get feedback, as at times the clients don't feel comfortable to talk about the providers. Um,
Right.
especially if the provider is nearby.
Oh my
That's
God, hope not.
yeah.
Oh.
That was my addition.
Yeah,
Especially
look,
if
it is scary.
yeah. Um,
I just think, you know, it was so much easier when you could often have people in groups and well, actually, it's really the owners. You can't do much about people that behave that way. If they punish, you know, it's just all kinds of wrong. But I would suggest that auditors should be writing it very carefully so that it never is able to be traced back.
Yes, writing a summary of the findings from the interviews rather than an interview A, interview B, interview C.
Yeah, that's correct. Yeah, so they can never really see where it came from. Yeah.
Any other questions, guys?
I think with your auditors, just make sure that you make sure you feel that you're in control. Like you get to choose who you want. You ask how much they charge each day. You know your rights, that there is a methodology and you're welcome to challenge them on that. You know. So
Yes, exactly. Oh, my comment was more, I asked providers how I work with, how they think of me and my service.
Oh, that's nice. Well, you know what? That's what we used to do with not-for-profits. You know, you had to do a great big survey once a year. So, and actually, when we audited not-for-profits, and they still do these days, but we would have big groups, and the groups of the stakeholders would turn up, and you'd hope you'd hope that everyone would say something nice about you. So it was good. That's what's missing. That's what I was going to say is what's missing is that we would have groups of stakeholders turn up on the day of the audit, and they would love being in a group, and it just doesn't happen. It just doesn't happen.
And we've got from Albert, are participant stakeholders in this reform? They should be. They've definitely said that they will be making sure that participants are included in this.
They're represented at a higher level, like they've been talking to them a lot. And you've got the self-appointed people who act for all participants everywhere. But and then surely, they would have groups that they would go to as well. They'd have to. Oh yeah. Okay.
Yes. Can you elaborate on the comments you both stated surrounding Year 8 language throughout youth workers and other stakeholders? So last year, Gina and I attended a behaviour support conference, and one of the recommendations that they were making for behaviour support practitioners was that from their findings of a review, I think it was University of Queensland that did a review of a bunch of behaviour support plans, the language that they were written in was just too complex for the average support worker to understand. They had recommended for the best outcomes that they should be written at an 8th grade reading level. So that is how the language should be. It shouldn't be more complex than that. So that's what we mean. And if they are saying that to behaviour support practitioners, you can kind of extrapolate that and put it to the rest of the plans too.
Yeah.
You're
Yeah,
welcome.
they shouldn't be a barrier in themselves, should they?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Plain English, simple language, is always better. Because it shouldn't be in clinical language. Allied health professionals, they can write what they like on their own papers. But if other people are supposed to follow it, then we don't need to use incredibly vulgar kind of diagnostic terminology and stuff like that. It's not helpful. Not for the working document. So, yeah, I think that will improve things, It'll make a difference.
Yes.
So, okay, so, nothing to be scared about. I think it's all going to be okay. It's just going to take time. I'd rather be on the ship earlier than later, because I just know how they gouge at the audit companies when everyone's desperate. So Yeah, that would be my best advice, I think.
Absolutely.
Sure.
If there's no other questions, then I think we can oh, there's one. I sometimes read behavior plans and think if I have my client having a behavior, I would not be able to find what they need to do. So the
Yeah,
Year 8 language is good, but I think every doc should be written in that way. Exactly.
I
Cass,
agree. Yeah.
yes, sometimes they also recommend that they do a support worker specific plan, that is just containing the relevant tips rather than the
Absolutely. Yeah.
preamble that they don't really need to read.
And you can tell them that. So I'm putting mine, for example, so there's the behavior support plan, and I'm putting the behavior support plan into a training document, which will cut out all the white noise and just have the proactives and the et cetera, triggers, etc. So yeah, it's not followable if it's not,
Exactly.
readable. Is it?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, well done, everyone. And I think the same, for a plan. I mean, I know behavior support plans get a bit more complicated, but the same for a plan. Easy peasy. It needs to be easy peasy, doesn't it?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
And there's nothing wrong with putting it up on a training LMS and having it there so that people can do it, you can ask questions on it, make sure that check their knowledge, and then they can access it anywhere they need to, I think there's lots of things that we could do as providers, etc., that can make it easier for people to access and understand. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Okay.
One question. I'm a bit concerned about the ICANN support needs assessment tool. Anyone heard
Mm.
anything about this?
Hasn't gone any further so far, except that they've trained a bunch of people and they've hired a bunch of people and they're testing it. So that'll be being piloted as well. I mean, look, it's no secret that the assessment of needs has not been good. Maybe it's them understanding that they really at LAC and planner level, their AI that they've been using for years is really not doing a good job of it. So I think it's nice to see them fall back on something else for exchange and not invent the wheel and that wheel be broken in the first place. So yeah, I think watch and see. It definitely needed improving. There wasn't equity. There was not equity. There were some people whose needs are real and they're getting nothing, and other people whose needs are made up and they're getting everything. So there is something very wrong with the the disparities between plans for people.
Fabulous then. We'll send out this recording after this, so you'll all get a copy of that. And just some more information if you've got any questions. We do consulting and all the rest of it. So we'll put that all in the email for you. But thank you everyone for joining. It was a lovely session. And I hope
Yeah.
you got what you needed out of it.
Yes, and we'll probably pop this up on our YouTube channel anyway,
Yeah.
as well as send it out. Yeah.
No worries. Thank you all. Thanks.
Thank you.
Okay.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.